Perdita talked for years about doing something useful for the people on this property. Nola stopped. Her throat worked. She never quite managed to start. And I think I have not been entirely fair to you. The room was very still. You lost someone you loved, Aurelia said quietly, and I arrived in her house. That's not a small thing to ask anyone to manage. Nola blinked once rapidly. No, it isn't. I'm not her. I know. A pause. I know that now. They sat in the firelit room, and the silence between them had changed. No longer the careful orbiting of two women looking for safe distance, but something quieter. Something that might become, given time, something more. After a while Nola said, long gloves for the dinner. Peregrine told me to wear whatever I'm comfortable in. Peregrine, Nola said, with the particular tone of a woman who has loved an oblivious man her entire life and has long since resigned herself to it, does not understand what Mina Wellsley's dining room is capable of. The gloves won't conceal everything. The rumors will have reached that room before we arrive, but they make it harder for someone to manufacture a scene out of thin air. A pause. Unless you'd rather give them the scene yourself, on your own terms. Aurelia looked at her. Is that what you would do? Nola considered it with real seriousness. Honestly, no. I would have been ill with worry for a week beforehand. A pause. But you wouldn't be. Aurelia picked up her book. I haven't decided yet. Whatever you decide, Nola said, and her voice had found something it hadn't had before. Not quite warmth, but reaching toward it. I'll be standing beside you. Aurelia looked up, held her gaze. Thank you, she said. Nola moved toward the door, paused. Aurelia, not her title, her name, like a choice deliberately made. Yes. Peregrine told me he asked you about the scar and you told him the truth. A pause. He didn't say much else. He didn't need to. She went through the door. Aurelia sat alone, with the fire settling low and the Massachusetts night pressing against the windows. She pushed her sleeve back and looked at the scar in the firelight. Silver white, permanent, exactly what it had always been. The record of one morning in Lawrence when she had made a choice, and 2 children had lived, and she had been carrying the evidence on her skin for 3 years, and trying very hard not to let it become the whole of who she was. She thought it might be time to stop trying. She pulled her sleeve down, picked up her needle. The dinner was coming. She was going to be ready. The Wellsley house was everything the season required. 40 candles, 30 guests, and the particular quality of laughter that has nothing to do with anything being funny. Aurelia knew that laughter. She had grown up adjacent to it. Close enough to understand its rhythms, never quite at its center, always watching rather than performing. She arrived with Peregrine, wearing the garnet earrings he had produced that morning from a small velvet case, with the slightly baffled expression of a man presenting something he felt strongly about, but could not entirely explain. She kept her own black evening gloves, long, plain, unadorned, not because she was hiding anything. Because she had not yet decided how the evening would go, and she wanted that decision to remain hers. Mina Wellsley received them in the entrance hall, with the practiced warmth of a woman who has been hostessing for 30 years, and has never once accidentally been sincere about it. Her husband, a broad and jovial man, whose joviality lived primarily on the surface, shook Peregrine's hand and kissed Aurelia's, and said how delightful it was to finally meet her. Mrs. Ravenswood was standing near the fireplace. Their eyes met across the room. Aurelia smiled, without warmth, without coldness, steady. She had been steady for a very long time. The dinner seated 30. Aurelia was placed to Mr. Wellsley's right, which she understood immediately for what it was. A position of examination dressed as honor. Close enough to the head of the table to matter. Exposed enough that the room could watch her manage it. She managed it. She talked to Mr. Wellsley about the coming winter and the wool market, and the labor reforms moving through the state legislature, and she watched him revise his expectations of her, with the transparency of a man not practiced at hiding surprise. She talked to the retired general on her left, a man with strong opinions about supply lines, and the particular delight of someone who has found a conversation partner, willing to push back, and she held her own well enough that he told her she was wasted in a parlor, which she accepted graciously, because she had learned that some battles are worth having, and some are best saved for a night when you've had more sleep. She did not look at Mrs. Ravenswood directly. She tracked her by the quality of attention in the room. The way you track weather by pressure, by the change in the air before the thing itself arrives. The move came between the fish and the main course. Mrs. Chadwick leaned forward 3 seats down with the bright, deliberate interest of a woman who has been assigned her role in the evening and is performing it faithfully. Mrs. Hargrove, I understand you've been calling on the mill workers quite regularly. Something of a medical nature? The table did not go quiet exactly. It went the way a room goes, when a group of people who have been waiting for something feel it beginning. I've been providing basic care to the families on the Hargrove property, Aurelia said. Several children needed attention, and the nearest physician is 8 miles out. It seemed the sensible thing to do. How extraordinary, said Mrs. Chadwick. Where does one learn such things? From my father, a physician here in Boston. He was generous with his knowledge. A small pause. Medicine is not mysticism. Most of it is observation and patience, and I have found those of considerable use. But for a woman of your position. A woman of my position, Aurelia said pleasantly, has both a working mind and working hands. I have never understood why either one should be left idle. The general laughed. A genuine laugh, surprised out of him. 2 other people down the table smiled. Mr. Wellsley was looking at her with an expression she could not fully categorize, but which did not appear unfriendly. She picked up her fork. Mrs. Ravenswood had not moved, had not spoken, was watching. Aurelia ate her dinner. The conversation shifted and branched the way it does at long tables, splitting into smaller currents, rejoining, breaking apart again. She answered and asked, and gave nothing away that she had not decided to give. Peregrine, seated diagonally across from her, caught her eye twice. The first time she gave him a slight nod. I'm fine. The second time she simply held his gaze for a moment and found, to her own surprise, that it helped. That the steadiness she saw in his face reflected something back at her she hadn't known she needed reflected. She looked away first, went back to the general. The dessert course arrived, and with it, Mrs. Ravenswood. Her voice when it came was perfectly modulated. She had been saving herself for exactly this moment, for the ease of dessert, when wine has done its quiet work and guards come down. Mrs. Hargrove, carrying precisely as far as she intended it to carry. I have been meaning to ask, the gloves. A gracious, curious tilt of the head. Is there a particular reason? One does wonder. The table shifted. Conversations dimmed by 1 degree. 30 people oriented themselves toward the question, with the precision of compass needles finding north. Mrs. Ravenswood's fingers closed around Aurelia's wrist. Aurelia did not pull away. She took 1 breath, and in the space of that breath, she made the decision she had been making for 3 weeks. Not about what to say, but about what it meant to say it. She was not going to wait for it to be taken from her. She was not going to let someone else arrange the telling. She was going to speak plainly, in her own voice, before the room could take any shape she hadn't chosen. She looked directly at Mrs. Ravenswood. I have a scar on my right arm, she said. The sentence dropped into the room, like a stone into still water. From a fire, she continued, 3 years ago, in Lawrence. There was a mill fire. 2 children were trapped in the upper stairwell when the fire reached the landing. She paused. 1 beat, deliberate. They came out. My arm did not come out undamaged. Another pause. I wear gloves in company as a consideration to others, not as concealment from them. Tonight I wore them because it seemed appropriate to the occasion. She looked around the table, clear-eyed, present, offering neither apology nor performance. The children are 10 and 12 now, both in school. Their mother wrote to me in May. Silence, not even the sound of silverware. Mr. Wellsley spoke first. His voice had changed from its dinner party register into something plainer. A mill fire, he said, and you went in. Yes. 2 children. Yes. A different silence than the first. Different in texture, in temperature, in what it was asking everyone in the room to do. The general said, with the blunt directness of a man who left social calculation behind sometime in his 60s. Good God, Mrs. Hargrove. That's something. It was 3 years ago, she said. I don't tell it for sympathy. I tell it because Mrs. Ravenswood asked a direct question, and I have always believed direct questions deserve direct answers. She looked at Mrs. Ravenswood one last time, held her gaze, steady, clear, without aggression. There was no anger left in her for this. She had burned through all of that years ago. She was simply present, simply true. Mrs. Ravenswood said nothing. And in that silence, Peregrine Hargrove stood up. Aurelia had not expected it. She had seen him start to rise in the corner of her vision and felt something tighten in her chest, because she had just finished rescuing herself, completely, cleanly, and she did not need. But that was not what he did. He stood, he lifted his glass, And he looked at her across the full length of that candlelit table with an expression she had not yet seen on his face, open and unhurried and entirely without performance. "I would like to propose a toast," he said. His voice was the same quiet, definitive voice he always used, the one that didn't reach for effect, didn't ornament, didn't seek approval. "To my wife, Aurelia Hargrove, who has, in 3 weeks, treated 4 children, 2 mill workers, and 1 case of entirely preventable infection on this property, all without being asked, all without requiring thanks, and all with a degree of skill that puts me to shame for not having arranged the same myself years ago." He paused. "And who has, it appears, considerably more courage than any of us at this table had reason to expect." He held up his glass. Mr. Wellsley lifted his first. The general lifted his with a low sound of approval. One by one glasses rose around the table. Not all of them. Mrs. Ravenswood's stayed where it was. Mrs. Chadwick's did not move, but enough of them. Enough that the room had tilted, definitively, in a direction that no amount of subsequent maneuvering was going to correct. Aurelia looked at her husband across that table full of candlelight and crystal, and the particular complicated wreckage of what had just happened. She did not perform gratitude or relief or any of the things moving through her too quickly to name. She simply looked at him. He looked back. She lifted her glass. They drank. The evening collapsed within the hour, as evenings tend to once their defining moment has passed. Mrs. Ravenswood left without speaking to Aurelia, a sophistication of avoidance so well executed that Aurelia could almost admire it. Mina Wellsley caught her at the door. "Mrs. Hargrove." Her voice was different from earlier in the evening, not warm. Mina Wellsley was not a woman who moved quickly toward warmth, but recalibrated, thoughtful, in the way of someone who has been doing arithmetic and arrived at an unexpected sum. "My daughter," she said. "She has had a condition since she was 16. The physicians I have consulted have given me 3 different explanations and 2 conflicting courses of treatment, and she has not improved in 4 years." A pause, carefully controlled. "I have been told you have studied rather widely." Aurelia looked at her steadily. "I would be glad to speak with you about it. Not as a physician, I don't carry that title. As someone who has read considerably and observed a great deal." Something moved across Mina Wellsley's face that Aurelia had not expected to see there. Plain, uncomplicated relief. "Yes," she said, "I think that would help." She moved away. Peregrine appeared at Aurelia's shoulder with her coat, which she had entirely forgotten she'd brought, and settled it around her with the same quiet, deliberate care he used for everything. "All right," he said. "More than all right." He looked at her for a moment. "You didn't need me to stand up." "No," she said, "I didn't." "I know." A pause. "I stood up because I wanted to. Because what you said deserved to be said, and I wanted that room to know I had heard every word of it." He was quiet for one beat. "And because I have not been proud of much in a long time, and I had forgotten what it felt like." Aurelia looked at him in the cold of the Wellsley doorstep, the November night clean and dark around them, and thought, "I did not expect you." She didn't say it, not yet. It was too new, too precise form to risk speaking carelessly. "Take me home," she said instead. "Yes," he said. They walked to the carriage together, and if his hand found hers in the dark, and if she held it, solid and certain and entirely real, neither of them said anything about it. Some things did not need words yet. Nola was waiting up. Aurelia told her everything, and Nola listened without interrupting, which Aurelia had come to understand was one of her particular gifts. The ability to hold a silence while someone fills it without crowding. When Aurelia finished, Nola was quiet for a long moment. "You told the whole room," she said at last, before she could. "Yes." Something shifted in Nola's expression, complicated, private, moving through several things at once. "Perdita would never have done that," she said. Her voice was careful, not unkind. She would have managed it beautifully. Deflected, charmed, moved the conversation somewhere safer, and it would have worked. A pause. For a while. "That sounds exhausting," Aurelia said. Nola looked at the fire. "It was," she said softly. "I think it was, for her, in ways I didn't understand until recently." She was quiet for a moment. "He loved her. I want you to know I believe that completely. But he loved the life they had arranged together. He didn't." She stopped. "He didn't ask if it was what she wanted." The room was very still. "He's not doing that anymore," Aurelia said quietly. Nola looked at her with the steadiness she reserved for things she had decided were worth saying. "No, he isn't." A pause. "He doesn't need managing. He needs someone who will stand in a room full of people waiting for her to flinch and simply not flinch. He needs someone who goes toward a child coughing in a strange lane before anyone asks her to. She held Aurelia's gaze. He needs you specifically, I see that now. Something in Aurelia's chest loosened by precisely 1 degree, the particular feeling of a door opening that had been closed so long. She had forgotten there was light on the other side. Thank you, she said, and meant it completely. Nola stood, moved toward the door, stopped. Aurelia, not her title, her name. Yes. Leave the gloves in the drawer when you're in this house. A pause. You don't need them here. She went through the door. Aurelia sat alone for a moment. Then slowly she worked the buttons of her left glove, slid it off, set it on the arm of the chair, then the right. She looked at her own hands in the lamplight. The scar, silver white and permanent. The record of one morning in Lawrence when she had made a choice, and 2 children had lived, and she had been carrying the evidence on her skin for 3 years, and trying very hard not to let it become the whole of who she was. She thought it might be time to stop trying. Outside, November did what November does, cold and clear and entirely indifferent to the business of people inside houses. Below, she could hear the sound of Peregrine's steps moving through the hallway, and the house settling into itself around her. The sound, she realized, of a place that was beginning to be home. She did not put the gloves back on. She looked at her bare hands in the lamp's low light and let herself want this. The house. The work, the man downstairs who had stood at a dinner table not to rescue her, but because he was proud of her and had forgotten until that moment what pride felt like. She let herself hold on to the wanting. That was, she decided, the bravest thing she had done in 3 years. Braver than the fire in Lawrence. Braver than the dinner table tonight. She held on and she did not let go.